Okay, so first things first when getting set up, you're going to want to take your tensioning wrench and you're going to stick it right here, here, and on the bottom here. There's 3 screws. Again, those screws are here, here, and here. So we're going to go ahead and start with the first 2. And you're going to have to give it a hard squeeze. So the easiest is actually to put the short end in first, and then you're going to kind of break the seal, so to speak, a little bit. With that, it'll give you a little more leverage and it'll be easier to do. Then you can put the long end in and do it from there. So I'm going to try to get on this side as well. And you're going to hear a lot of give because the tensioner is what keeps there a lot of tension on the actual belt itself, keeping the belt taut. So one of the things you want to do right now is wrap some tape around this whole side to keep the tension on this tensioner. You can't really see, but it actually moves back and forth, up and down. So you want to keep that tension loose for right now, and later you're going to want to put it taut. That gap right there, that's the tension that holds the belt. See how the belt, you can't really see it right now, but the belt will loosen and tighten based on how taut. So what you want to do is you want to put the wrench in first, get it ready to go. You can kind of squeeze it so it's about as taut as it will get, and then squeeze this whole thing. You might need some help to do this, but you want this gap to completely disappear. You go ahead and squeeze it with one hand and then tighten it with the other. Get it good and taut. You should see that there hopefully is as little, if none of a gap as possible. All right, there we go. And then I'm going to tighten the other side too for now, so it stays nice and snug. Good. Now you have loosened up the belt as much as possible. And you should be able to feel by squeezing, you'll feel how loose this belt is. And you probably will be able to even move it around like this, where you probably couldn't before. Okay, so now that you've done that, you're going to take your wrench and you're going to put it inside here, and you're going to want to loosen it, which means you're going to turn it counterclockwise to the wheel. So you want it to go basically backwards, and that's what's going to loosen it up. It'll feel like it's tight the whole time because of the way the nut is, but that's okay. Alright, so once you have that pretty much all the way off, you can see that right here. So here's the nut. The nut has a plastic end here, so we're going to stick that face down. And then what you want to do is you're going to pull the wheel off like this. So keep in mind, there's 2 washers you're going to want to keep track of. One's in here, and then one's on the other side of the wheel. So as I pull this, I'm actually going to use one hand to turn it so the belt, I'm going to use one hand to turn it so the belt, whoop, there goes that one washer. Keep track of it. So the belt will just come right off, and I can then pull the wheel completely out. Now don't forget, like I said before, there's another washer. You could probably just leave it on, but that other washer is right here. You want to make sure that that washer is there because it's really important. There is also an O-ring right here. That's something that you will want to leave in. It's really important, but for now we can leave it be. Okay. So again, the reason you do this is so you can keep the whole unit from sliding off while you disassemble this part. Okay, so now that you have this done, you're going to put everything back in here and you're going to loosen this piece. There's some things that you want to keep in mind though. To really take off this unit, you need to unscrew this one, and this one. But there's a spring unit inside of here, so you don't want the whole thing to quite slide off. But you need to be able to slide this cap off so you can take the belt off. Kind of tricky, but bear with me, we'll get through it together. Okay, so first things first, you're going to want to undo these, and you'll feel it give because now you're loosening the tension. So you'll feel it probably pop all the way back like that. And that's okay. So we're going to go all the way back. Quick side note, don't use a white blanket like I did. It's a lot dirtier now. Great for filming, not so great for staying clean. Okay, so you're going to completely take these screws all the way out. That one should be all the way loose there. Well, we're going to do this one. Okay, so that one's going to pop out just like that. See if we can get this bad boy to pop out just the same. That's okay though. All right, now here's an important part. Make sure that this does not slide off when you undo this one. So I'm gonna put a little bit of pressure here, just like this, kind of keeping the cap in place. And then I need to break the seal of the screw first by going in here like this. Okay, so again, you're gonna want to make sure that it does not slide off all the way. So put a good brace right there, and then come in here and loosen up this cap completely. Got the screw. Keep the brace on that. You're going to take that one off. See, just like that. You can see the tear I have right there. That was going to cause some serious issues. And now I'm going to take the new one, put the bottom part on like that, get it set up, and then I'm going to snap this right back into place. The easiest way to do that will be to put the first screw in. If your hands get a little dirty, don't worry, it's all part of it. Anytime you work on changing bearings on a skateboard or anything like that, you're going to deal with a lot of grease. Okay, so that one should snap right back in. Again, if you have the tension on it, you should be able to apply it pretty quickly. Go ahead and tighten the bottom one down all the way, because that just holds on the cap. It doesn't actually control the tensioning part. Give these some good extra tightening turns, because you don't want anything to rattle loose as you're riding. Okay, so I've got one tensioner back in. The next part is taking the other screw that's still in here. Okay, so as you're doing this, one thing you can do, depending on time and everything else, and depending on if you have anyone else to help you out, is once you tighten this all the way, you can tape it with any kind of tape, masking or whatever, around here and around the motor, and that will keep it snug so it doesn't fly off and the springs don't fly out. Once you have the wheel out, go ahead and pull it taut all the way, tighten it down, and then take your tape and wrap it around the motor. It's probably easiest to come in from the bottom. Wrap it around the motor and your truck. Make sure you pull it really taut. See how tight it is when you wrap it around? Because you want to be able to have this loose, but you don't want your motor to move. That'll keep it from the springs popping out, and it'll save you a lot of hassle later. Pull it real taut and wrap it around one more time just to make sure that it does not move at all. It doesn't have to look clean. Alright, now when you go in here to loosen this up, to take off your belt and replace it, you'll see that it barely moves. See how it barely moved? Which will allow you to unscrew all three of these screws. That one, and now this one, which you may have to come in here and actually do. You may have to break the seal. Sometimes you need to do that more than once with the short end of the wrench to get better leverage. And then you'll come in here like this and loosen it. And this will allow you to take this off and undo the belt without this flying out. If this flies out, these two big springs, one on this side and one on this side, will fly out, and it'll take you a lot longer to replace it. But if you have it taped, it'll keep it like that, and you can easily undo it like this, and you'll see this. Here's a screw, here's a screw, here's a screw, and then you'll be able to put your new belt on just like that. Make sure the teeth line up, make sure it's good and snug right in there, and then you're going to put the cap back on. You can put your thumb on the back, and then it'll kind of help put some pressure. Put the main screw in, which is the bottom one, and think of just doing everything that you just did, but in reverse again. Here, I'm going to try to put this on here. I'm going to try to do this with one hand. There we go. Put the main screw in first. Tighten that down. I'm going to come in for the short end, and I'm going to get it really good and snug. The reason why you want to do this really good and snug is because you don't want any of these screws vibrating and wiggling loose as you ride. That can be fairly problematic. Okay, so I'm going to get it in there nice and tight, and keep doing this until it's all the way. So I've got a good snug right there. I'm going to do one more on the short end. Sometimes you gotta come play with it. There you go, like that. Okay, now this whole unit will still slide up and down. As you can see how that gap right there? See how that gap is opening and closing? That means it can still tighten and loosen. So first things first, you want to put the screws in and just give them a little bit of a tighten, not a whole lot. Do the other side too. The reason why you don't want to do it a whole lot yet, you just want to get them in place, is because you're going to want to tighten this all the way. It may be helpful to actually come from the other side. If you're right-handed, use your right hand to grip it like this, and remember, we want to pull that closed. So we want that gap to close as much as possible. So I'm going to pull it closed, grip it with one hand. You may need someone else to help you out with this. And then come in here and tighten this all the way down. Tighten it all the way down, have that gap as close as possible, and then go in and tighten the bottom too. The reason why you want to do this is because by making the gap as small as possible, you're making the belt as loose as possible. So it's easier to slide the whole wheel on in here, as we will do right now. Alright, you've got everything tightened, you've got everything ready to go. Go ahead and use a paper towel. Hopefully you have one laying around, because I didn't tell you to include it in the beginning. And if you have it, if your wheels are as dirty as mine, I'm just going to give it a quick wipe down. So I'm just going to give it a quick rotate it around. Just get it cleaned up. Take care of my gear. Okay, so if I really want to, I could actually take this completely apart. I don't know if you how well you can see in there, and actually clean out the insides. But for right now, I'm not going to do that, because I'd rather do that when I actually schedule cleaning. So I'm going to try to slide this in there as much as possible. It's going to be a little tricky because you might need to jiggle it around depending on the way the inside of your wheel is currently rocking and rolling. Mine, I have to shimmy it around a little bit to get it set. The easiest thing to do, so sometimes you might have, see how that little guy in there isn't quite cooperating? So what you might want to do is come in from behind. You can't really see this, but I come in from the front with this so I can kind of put it all the way through, and then I can feed it onto the wheel itself and kind of shimmy it around to get it right in there the way I need it to be. There we go. So as soon as I shimmy it around like that, it'll pop on. And then all you're gonna do is loop the belt as good as you can on the wheel. The easiest way to do that is by putting it on the top of the wheel, pushing down a little bit, and then just kind of giving it a little bit of a turn as you put it on. And you can kind of put your fingers around it like that, and you'll slide it into place, and you can kind of give it some turns as you finally push the wheel all the way. You may hear some clicking, that's okay. That basically means it's clicking back here on that gear your belt is as it gets put into place. All right, so now that we have the wheel on, let's go ahead and put the nut back in, our trusty dusty nut, which we also have to make sure we're not forgetting one other thing. Do you remember what that is? The washer, that's right. So we're gonna put the washer in first. So you're gonna put the washer around that little rod in there, and then you're gonna take your nut, very, very important, make sure the nylon is this part right here. See that like little rubbery part? This is the back of the nut, doesn't have it, but this part does. It's a little discolored, a little different colored. You wanna make sure that's facing out like this. So you can just take your nut and drop it in there. No, I'm just kidding. You're not gonna want to drop it in there. But just go ahead and put it in there. And I like to put it in with my finger, push it on there, and then I like to try to give it a couple turns before I get a wrench out, just so I can make sure it's going on correctly. I'm gonna get my wrench, put it on it. Make sure now I'm going clockwise, which is this way. I want it to basically turn like this to make sure I'm putting the nut on correctly. So I'm gonna go like that and tighten it all the way down. Now you wanna go all the way until you're gonna feel a little bit of a give. What that is that's the nylon part. So you're gonna keep going, keep tightening down the nut all the way until you feel it stop. Now if you feel it stop, go ahead and give it a slight turn to tighten it, but then, it's very, very important you do this, go ahead and loosen it a little bit. Because what you basically want it to be is you want it to be tight, but you don't want it to be super tight where it keeps the wheel and everything else from turning correctly, because then everything is gonna get screwed up internally. So you want to be able to make sure everything and there's no wiggle or anything like that. You can check your other wheels to see how much of a wiggle there is. I like to come back sometimes and just give it a little bit of an extra tighten or a little bit of an extra loosen, depending on what I feel like is best for my wheel. Okay, so once that's done, reason why this may not turn, it'll probably turn a lot easier on the other one, is because you have it taped. So now that you have it on here, you can actually take off the tape. Probably been easier to take it off a couple steps ago, but that's okay. Easiest way to take off the tape is just by cutting it, or doing what I'm doing by actually breaking it and tearing it. So we're going to take off the tape like that, and you'll be able to see that this should turn pretty well, and your wheel, the belt should be right kind of on the center of your wheel. Okay, so now that you have that all done, everything is pretty much ready to go. The last part is the tensioning. Belt tensioning is super important because you don't want this to be wobbly. You want it to be tight, because that's going to help you maximize everything that your motor is doing. So when you do this, remember this is completely sealed right now. There's no gap. So we're going to make sure that the belt is just about in the middle of the wheel, so there's a little bit of silver on either side for the gear. And then you're going to come back in here. You don't really need to do anything. Make sure your tape is off, or else this won't do this. And then you're going to loosen the top two nuts, or screws I should say. When you do that, you're going to feel it as you loosen each of them a little bit. You're going to see a gap appear again. See? And as I do it a little bit more, it appears even more. What that means, and you can feel it, is the springs are pushing back and opening this up, therefore tightening your belt. And now it is perfectly taut. It's a good gap in there. And now we're going to come back and tighten it even more to lock it back down. Tighten the bottom ones. And I like to come in here one last time with the small end of the wrench and give it a good torque tighten. If it flies out, you're okay. Just be careful of not stripping the screw. It's pretty much all ready to go. I'm just going to do the bottom here. Give that a good tighten. as much as possible. And now you should be pretty much good to go. The last thing you want to do, of course, is grab your remote and give it a quick test run. I'd say it's pretty good to me. Alright guys, I hope this was really helpful for you. I had fun making it. Some things to keep in mind are things are always going to happen that you didn't expect. Hopefully this goes as well as it did for you as it did for me. Make sure you're careful. Make sure you're really careful putting these parts back together. Make sure you don't forget anything because it's really important. You're going to be going really fast on this board and it's really important that you put everything back together the way you got it. I want to give a quick shout out to Boosted. You guys were awesome. Thanks so much for your customer support and your prompt feedback and even your willingness to take some criticism on my part. Appreciate it. You guys rock. So happy I'm a Boosted rider. I'm out.